My mom's here. Hey, Mom. My great-grandma broke the news to me. Mom and Dad were too big of cowards to fight outside their bedroom, leaving us kids with the distinct impression that their marriage was perfect. Disney World and camping trips and building forts out of bedsheets and pecking each other on the lips when they knew we were watching. Kids at school could be cruel creatures who would make fun of my buck teeth and oversized ears and give me insecurities I've carried for many years. But there were two people who sat down to dinner with me every night who could calm those fears. A constant eternal force that reminded me that the world does not have a big enough eraser to wipe the smiles from my face. And then my great-grandma told me Dad was moving out. Their love was not real, and a piece of my childhood was taken away. Its absence left a hole deep inside my gut. No, literally. I was an 11-year-old with gastric ulcers because the thought of my dad living in his own condo caused acid to melt the lining of my stomach. I was the dent in the rear car door after being T-boned on the highway, and neither driver would admit whose fault it was. Oh, fantastic, a condo. Unlimited Coca-Cola, Little Debbie's for breakfast. Dad even bought me my own pet ball python. He even suggested its name, Squeeze. Purely coincidence that that's my mom's nickname. I'll never forget the Christmas Eve when Mom told us that Dad would be spending the night with the family so he could be there on Christmas morning when we opened up the presents. He'd be there to put the carrot sticks on the roof for the reindeer. We imagined he'd watch 3 straight screenings of The Christmas Story with us boys. We even imagined that he'd lock our door like he used to do to keep us from sneaking out at 4 a.m. and seeing our presents. And the best part? Dad would spend the night with Mom, together, in their bed. But Dad forgot to lock the door, and at 4 a.m. we snuck out to find him sleeping on the couch. I don't care if 50% of kids go through this. I still could not sleep or breathe or feel like a child whose family was not sliced, ripped in half. And I've carried these bags under my eyes since I was 11. My eyes turned a shade of pinkish red towards the end of high school, and I squeezed Visine into them before going home if I knew my mom was there. You see, I developed 2 very distinct lives. There was the half that never said swear words, who played guitar at youth groups, smiled, was always smiling. And then there was the half who always had a can of Axe body spray in the car, who made sure he took the bottle caps out of his pockets before his mom did the laundry. Both halves were hiding from something, but never hid in the same place. Until finally those halves conjoined with chain links that had cuffs on each end. And I was marched into a concrete cell by a police officer who could smell a certain odor on my sweatshirt. My greatest fear was having a spotlight aimed at either half. My mom used to say, "It doesn't matter what's going on in Trevor's life. That boy is always happy." Well, I guess my disguise worked. But the mask was finally pulled from my face, and in small towns, people love gossip. On page 3 of the newspaper were 2 lines that exposed one of my halves, and some youth group moms whispered, "I can't believe a pothead took my son to camp." And some acquaintances who found my mugshot on the internet laughed, "I knew there was something wrong with him." And that same acid boiled in my stomach when I realized my mom would finally meet her real son, one who isn't always smiling. A boat taking on water that could not be heaved over the sides fast enough. The hole from that cannonball was too big, and she would finally see through it. And the thought of looking my mom in the eyes the morning I got out of jail made me not want to continue to breathe. These 2 worlds were never supposed to meet. The sun and the moon should rise and climb the sky at different times, but now these masses collided, and my fragmented life was smashed and splintered even more in broad daylight. She stepped out of the car and looked at me, but my gaze was at the ground. I could hear her footsteps as she approached, but saw nothing but my blurred shoes through lenses of burning salt water. This boat was sinking fast. I tensed my muscles as I awaited her wrath. I imagined her face would be a dark red as she screamed at me to hide the wrinkle I drew across her forehead, the mark of a failure. The boy she raised was too fazed by this world, and perhaps she shouldn't have had him in the first place. But instead, she hugged me. And my mom cried, "Oh, Trevor, I love you." And she said it over and over again. And for the first time since I was 11 years old, I started to believe it. Have you ever seen a forest fire? Not a brush fire, I'm talking about a real forest fire. Tall, thick flames splash black ink on fine art that took thousands of years to paint. Millions of leaves on ancient trees swallowed in an instant, buried in their own ash. You cannot hear the cry of forest dwellers fleeing from the carnage. Their cries are muffled by the inferno's deep laugh, a twisted mockery of the wind, a breath with no scent but an overwhelming heat. There's no counting constellations or spotting shooting stars at night. The sky is blotted out by smoke and ash. All is reduced to ash. If good and evil do exist in this world, surely forest fires are caused by the latter. But then comes spring. Somehow seeds survived in the soil. Seeds that could not sprout before the fire, but carbon from fallen trees is the perfect fuel to give life to a wild geranium. Or the cone of a white pine that was singed but was not burned. There were still zygotes deep within its hard shell that multiplied when the rain fell. And now a simple stalk climbs the side of a charred trunk, the remnant of a time when the forest was distinguished by death. But even death can be extinguished by the stark contrast of bright green on a black canvas. And the life within that seed could not stand the connotation that this fire was evil. Because here's my revelation. That pine would have never sprouted from the ground, or made a whistling sound when the breeze teems in its canopy, or created pine cones of his own who hung from his strong limbs until they were ready to fall to the forest floor, or grew needles who kept their color in winter when the rest of the world was monochromatic and static, if it was never licked by that flame and learned that sometimes you just have to wait for rain. My wife gave birth to my first child 2 weeks ago, my own pine cone. And I want so badly to lift him in my arms and whisper in his ears that this life of yours will be perfect. But that wouldn't be true. And that's okay. Thank you.